Hello again. So we're looking to hopefully launch this craft into this orbit. I did a test and got pretty close, not to this specific orbit. I think hitting those exact parameters are going to be really tricky, but to the same altitude. So that we both need to hit the right position of this as well as the altitudes. So right now, if I look from orbit and line things up like this. So right when, it just looks like a single line rather than seeing the ring there, I'm kind of looking right down that. And so I want this to also fall there. So when I'm looking at it this way, I want my, my launching craft to be right on that line. I don't know offhand, I'm sure MechJet probably has a way to do that, but I just, for something like this in low Earth orbit, I just do it by eye. So just kind of get in that path. Okay, so I think that's going to be good enough. Oh, and one other thing I need to look at. So here I can see the dots are traveling north, so I need to launch north. Now, so in reality, we wouldn't do that from here. At some point I'll be restarting this Korean 1.1, I think, with better cash rewards and such. We'd wait basically until we were on the other side, until Earth had rotated so we were here, and then head south. But we would do that from Vandenberg because we wouldn't want to fly over Cuba. So that's how it would be done realistically. Like kind of historically, if you want to go into a polar orbit, you'd launch south from Vandenberg. And you can launch north or south into this type of orbit. It just depends on, you just have to wait half a day for Earth to orbit around to the other half. All right, so wish me luck. I had to do something uniquely weird. Come on. I need my engines to light. I need all kinds of things to go. There we go, build up thrust. So, another thing, annoying thing I wish I had mentioned to Nathan Cal, it'd be handy if in stock or things you could target this orbit. You could select this orbit as if it was a craft that was in orbit for you to target, just like I can select this and say I want to target it. That would be nice. Although, understandably, an orbit isn't an individual object. You'd have to kind of rejigger some math to do that. All right, so here we'll head up into the sky, and I need to head north. So I need to change my numbers so I head north. So like I said, to do this launch, to carry this out in my test, I had to do something uniquely weird. Heading of 0, I think 0 is north, and let's go, where am I now, 84 point something, so let's say 85. I lobbed my upper stage, which I've literally never done because there's lots of good reasons not to do it, but by that I mean rather than setting up my trajectory so that, let me just get this a little further along before I start talking in depth. So rather than setting up my trajectory, so right after the Atlas burns out, I light the next stage. Because all of this is so short burning, really the limitation to get in that high of an orbit I found was the fact that I just don't have enough time to get there. Because the Agena, as I've mentioned, it's a very high thrust to weight ratio upper stage, very short burning, just sort of a test vehicle, and that's how I'm using it, as a test vehicle. Shortly I'll be moving to an Agena D. Okay, let's go to surface velocity now. But because of that short burn, there's really no way for my engines to still be running and be effective way up at that altitude, just because by the time I get to that altitude, enough time will have passed that I will, that I'll be out of fuel. So I literally, I lob, what my goal is here is to lob my upper stages up to that altitude. So up to, oh come on, why are you showing me that? AP, so 865 kilometers, and then, or pretty close to that, let's say 860 is my goal. Oh, and I forgot to set up an action group, and maybe I can do it through right-clicking because I want to shut off because I can kind of fine-tune with the verniers to get as close to that as I can during the last 30 seconds or minute of burn time. Just like, if you watch this number, boom, that number grows really, really substantially. I need to arc way down. Well, actually, I don't need to arc that much down now that I think about it, because I'm trying to hit such a high altitude relative to what I usually go to. Not only am I trying to get up to 800 and some kilometers up, but I'm also trying to stay there, trying to get into orbit at that altitude. So I was pretty surprised when this craft, I found it to be capable of getting into orbit at that altitude. This is also going to be a really weird orbit, just because it's north-south. It's polar. We might actually be in the dark all the time. But anyway, that's something I don't have to worry about. I just have to get it into that orbit, not whether it would be a useful orbit in practice. All right, so 2 minutes in. Okay, so see, like 39 seconds, boom, I dropped those because this is such low thrust compared to those, and we even if it isn't, if they're the same, we'd go from 1 minute to 3 minutes of burn time, for example. Let's see, so orbit, yeah, I still need to arc over a bit. Same thing would happen with the verniers, because the verniers produce a little bit of thrust there, 5 kilonewtons apiece versus 360 for the core. So in practice, when I'm just trying to fine-tune my orbit, that's actually in part why the Atlas was designed the way it was. Big boosters to get you off the ground, this core, light and efficient core engine to give you lots of delta V, and the little verniers just burning during the last little bit to give you that precision as an ICBM to hit within hundreds of yards from intercontinental ranges of the place you actually want to hit. So as I keep burning north, more and more north, this number is going to keep decreasing from negative, well, however you want to think of your math. The absolute value is going to be decreasing. It's going to become less negative towards 0. So negative 14, etc., etc. And I need to get pretty close to that orbit. So, whoa, did my engine shut down? I was just having a bit of trouble getting it to arc over. Okay, so only 2 minutes and 40 seconds left of this stage. Need to make it count. So I need to get this value as close to 0 as I can. So my Agena upper stage is steerable, and I'll show you everything I mean by that once I get up there. But ultimately I need to be fairly close to that inclination, absolutely within a degree, if not closer, by the time the stage burns out. Because I'm going to be attempting to lob this, so I'm keeping an eye on my AP, so it gets to about 865, because whether it's the descending node or the periapsis or the apoapsis, get out of the way. 864, those numbers are pretty close to each other. I can adjust that with the Agena engines, no problem. The trick is going to be hitting this ascending node. Yeah, I should have set up an action group to kill my core engine. Right. It's sort of surface. It looks like I'm arcing that way. It's complicated. The reason those are on different sides of the north line there because of the rotation of the Earth. So 6 degrees. So that's not coming down as fast as I want it to, unfortunately. That might be a point of contention. A bit tricky for me to get right. But I still have 2 minutes of burn time left. I'm not really using any time acceleration. But yeah, there's a couple of things I still want to complete in this series before I kind of restart it, knowing what I know now, that test flight and building all these buildings and things is really expensive, which I'm sure everybody's noticed that in playing RP-0. It's just I've never played it with entry costs, just because in part a lot of the entry costs were kind of WIP, work in progress values, and I was kind of busy fixing so many other bugs every time I was playing RP-0, and it just RP-0 just gets better and better the more time we put into it. And so now I feel, when I play it, it's in good enough shape and I have enough fun that I'm able and willing to play with entry costs now and kind of fiddle with those I'm close, I'm within a degree. Okay, and just a minute burn time. So once that gets, no, not the other side. I just want to still be close. So I'll just stay on just this side. Now the next thing I really need to do is get that altitude up to this. And it's not magic about that I'm starting to get towards that or I'm getting close. Simulations. Like, do your simulation, record it if you like. Like, that's honestly a good chunk of why I actually record these videos, is to learn back of what I did. What I did right, what I did wrong, and just so I can go back and look at numbers and such. Okay, so half a degree is probably as close as we're going to get. Okay, so with 2 kilometers a second, yeah, I can probably arc down a little more now. I want that to stay at its minimum, but really I just see that's why I'd like to be able to set that as target, to set that orbit. So rather than having to sit here and compare that number, I could just have it displayed in the HUD here. And ultimately, I could probably calculate it or do something where I have a number here that I know is what I'm looking for, like the ascending, whatever the properties of this orbit are. Anyway, okay, so that's approaching. That's good things. So I'm just arced a little bit low because I felt that this was getting close to, it was approaching 860 pretty fast. Yeah, this is, so when I post this video, I recorded this today. I kind of recorded a lot of videos in the last week or two and was just letting them catch up. Because, I like to be able to read your comments and feedback and kind of take them into account when I do things, rather than, somebody saying, oh, hey, this is how you change something. It's like, yeah, I figured that out the next video, which was, for me, almost a week ago. So, just like anybody making YouTube videos, it's kind of a balance of those things. Oh, and no, too late. Shut down engine. Oh, see, if I'd shut it down just a little earlier, I could have used these verniers for longer. Right now, it's just got a few seconds of vernier thrust. But that's effectively how how this Atlas was actually designed to be used. Was that when you're near, you're close to you use the main engine to kind of get up to your speed, to get close to your target. And now I just coast. That's why I'm not paying too much attention. I've got 7 minutes. Like I'm gonna do a bit of time warping and enjoy how beautiful the Earth looks from up here. But let's see. So I can drop that. I probably could have dropped that earlier, but yeah, I just recorded this within the last 24 hours. So before I move on to kind of starting another RP-0 career, kind of along the same lines in 1.1, because that'll be available in a couple weeks. Then I'd like to do a flyby or something of another planet. I'm pretty sure if you looked at the Kerbal alarm clock there, I'm going to miss those windows just because I don't have I had to build this, right? I had to build this rocket. So I don't have 2 rocket lines, which is just another place where I could feel that I'm short of cash. Here, let me click on the Earth. See, I'd like to be able to look at this from the side angle. Oh, and what is my node? Yeah, 0.6 degrees, not terrible. I might be able to correct that. So once I'm at this peak altitude, I need to burn with my remaining stage. So this lob I just did, sorry, I'm just jumping all kinds of topics. So I want to fly by the moon, probably crash into the moon, and fly by another planet. Those are my goals. Just kind of get to those like very early 1960s goals. Maybe put a human in orbit, but I've just done that so many times. I hope you guys have had the chance to do that as well in your games, that I don't think it's as high of a priority for me. To get that into this series before I reset for 1.1. So that looks pretty close, right? Yeah, pretty close. So let's see, we would need more delta V than we have to do that. Oh well. So it looks like I can't quite hit that orbit. Let's see, I do have all this tasty nitrogen that's not going to be enough to get that done. So it looks like I'm going to miss this orbit just because I'm a little short of delta V. I kind of took the wrong path, but I'm willing to accept failure. And if the contract's paid out a little bit more, then I'd be able to afford to accept failure a little more frequently. In practice, I think this is kind of a stockish contract that I took because it only pays out about 20K, which doesn't, it probably covers my launch costs, but not by a ton. But yeah, so this Agena vehicle, it's excellent. It's self-ullaging, so it means even if this fuel becomes not stable, I am able to turn on my RCS, pulse, and I'd be able to get to orbit. I would be able to settle that fuel. So you can only do that once you've got these little thrusters. You can even do that with nitrogen like I'm doing here. You don't need any modern RCS fuels, but you definitely need RCS like this that points back so that you can actually get a bit of forward G-force to settle your fuels before lighting an engine. Now, as an early Agena, it just has one light. Now, later Agenas, like the Agena B or the Agena D, they're way longer, they're larger, which means they can develop more delta V, which is what allows them to, push the Ranger to other planets and craft towards the pretty decent mass craft towards the moon, which is how I plan to try to crash things into the moon. And it can also relight, so later versions of this engine are able to relight, which is another capability we've not had in career here, which is just you gradually get these new things, a higher thrust engine or an engine that can relight, or technology like this that allows you to self-ullage. So let's see. So in practice, let us try to get into that orbit, or as close as we can. We might be able to get into orbit, into basic orbit, but I think I'm definitely going to fail this contract since this number is substantially larger than that number of delta V that I have. So first off, maybe I should just play these career games without persistent rotation, because I really only allow it to act when it's convenient to me. So why is it stabilizing time warp? Maybe just because I'm near that or something. So at least the orbit, the Earth looks nice from this altitude. Yeah, it just keeps. I'm not time warping out. Is it this? No, it's not Kerbal Alarm Clock. Usually, oh, of course, it's you. Okay, so I'll take my film, sure, recover. So you only get science from film by recovering it. So that is the science alert slowing me down, because every time I cross over a new biome. Okay, so I'm getting close to that. So let's point in the right direction, check that the engine. So see how the fuel is very unstable. Unfortunately, right now you can just kind of cheat that by spinning yourself a little bit. And so risky, it's going to settle itself. I'll point that out, or Nathan Kell might notice it once he eventually gets around to watching this video. But in practice, you'd usually want to have these jets backwards and thrust, and that would stabilize your fuel. And now, towards the node, ignite the engine. So I hit space, boom, and I have ignition. Currently, my the FX is still a little borked. Thought I had tested that to see if it was just a file that got accidentally bumped when real plume was last updated. But yep, this number's still bigger than that number, so my trajectory just wasn't efficient enough or something. So maybe I should have burned the booster engines longer, or maybe have dropped them off earlier and went with just the sustainer engine. Probably that. It's hard to say though, because on one hand you're carrying more dead weight, or non-fuel weight, when you're accelerating with all of the engines we had on the Atlas, and on the flip side of that, even though we have a higher efficiency, we're burning at a higher and higher altitude, which is less efficient. Your fuel is better expended at a lower altitude. Other than, obviously there's the correction for ISP, the efficiency. So it's a really difficult balancing act to make sometimes. Because in a test, I was definitely able to get to the 800 by some orbit, no trouble. Maybe it was the pitch, the inclination or whatever of the orbit that threw me off. Maybe I wasn't as close to this orbit in that test. Man, this looks really nice, doesn't it? This kind of perpetual sunrise, sunset. So we're going to get into a really nice orbit. We're just not going to complete the contract, but I can survive that. Ooh, okay, so time warp makes you wobble. All right then, I will not time warp then. I will give you your 40 seconds to run through. So yeah, this is my bigger payload in practice. So it has a bit of high test peroxide and little jets that allow it to deorbit itself, and also to orient itself for reentry, because I want to be able to recover this. In practice, I'll have to go through a few iterations of designing this, because the first spy cameras, they would have like a heavier piece of hardware like this, and then it would have a smaller capsule. So let's say this avionics would be necessary to bring this into orbit, but you wouldn't have to bring the whole camera and everything down. You would have like a small probe core with RCS and a chute and such and control, and then you would use this mod, which isn't popping up right now. Oh, did I not get into orbit? Oh well, I got close-ish. Yeah, it's not popping up right now, but it's crew manifest or ship manifest, something like that, which would allow me to transfer the film, because in practice they sent up this Agena with a camera, and then once the camera and all the objects had taken pictures of the Earth, and obviously the Russians, and then the film was in a little bucket, just a much smaller part of the craft, and that part of the craft was sent back to Earth and was recovered. So in practice, if I'm able to get this back, that's what I want to do, and it looks like it's going to be pretty easy because I didn't even make it to orbit. All right, so let us decouple there. The Agena no longer all that useful. So from the IRC, the Kerbal Realism Overhaul IRC, there's a guy whose name I can't pronounce. Let's go with Schnobs, and he provided me a craft file for a really good looking kind of Ranger-ish craft. I might be wrong in which one I'm thinking of. Let me see, Ranger. But basically I asked, you know, offhand, I just googled the word Ranger. Space probe. Maybe that'll get me closer. Yeah, you know, Ranger-ish. It's actually kind of 4 symmetry rather than 2 symmetry. And it looks good. It does. It looks like it's you know, nice and light. It's got avionics. So thanks to him, so I can borrow his craft to use for my you know, upcoming moon mission and planetary flybys. It's a pretty sleek, light craft. I think it'll be pretty good for my flybys of other planets. I might use something a little beefier for moon missions. We'll see. I might just kind of add on to that craft. So let's see. So we're going to crash down over here. Well, that's embarrassing for America. So we didn't orbit it, and not only that, it looks like we're going to crash somewhere in China or Russia. So they're going to get all our film technology. Oh well. So that's why they got to pay me better for these contracts. And it looks like we're going to come down in the dark. Whoa, come on, camera. Be nicer than that. Okay, so I need to ensure that I am pointed retrograde. So I've got high test peroxide, which is much more efficient than nitrogen, which is nice. Now let me just go to free camera so it doesn't kind of change my camera for its own fun. And profit. There we go. Whoa, swinging too much. Sometimes MechJib does that. Sometimes I do that. Come on. Come on, let's come back. Okay, so we're heading down at a pretty good clip, and we're going to keep increasing. It's going to be a rough re-entry, it looks like. But perfectly survivable. I'm using a larger heat shield here. It's not, as far as I recall, it's not in the current RP-0 release, which is what I'm using. It's non-RP-0, but it was placed very recently, placed and priced, so that it will be labeled as RP-0 compatible to come in the next RP-0 version. So there's my camera, so review photographs. So I would, normally in practice you would want to design a craft, if you're trying to design something kind of more historic. There we go, that's close enough. You would take the pictures with this and kind of have a smaller subcraft that you can pop off later and like use a small solid engine or something to deorbit it. So it was just a kind of a miniature bit of the craft that returned. So in practice that was the film buckets that the American spy camera program used, and they used that for quite a long time, many years, because you can take very high quality pictures with the equipment that they developed, but for one, signal transmission with a lot of data just wasn't really possible early on at this time. Heck, the computers weren't even very good at the time, and you wouldn't necessarily want to transmit the pictures of the enemy you'd taken in a way that the enemy might be able to capture or decrypt them if you were beaming the signal down. Nowadays, I think that's done by lasers, so you'll have a tight laser beam from the spy satellite that you use to send the images down. And I read something in the last couple of weeks said that the Soviets actually did basically the same thing, did film return until like the 90s or something like that, maybe the early 2000s. And I mean, if it's a proven technology, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you have enough experience, you have kind of perfected the technology so it succeeds enough of the time, why change it? But as technology improves, you get more and more incentives to just laser the pictures down, because you can get them in real time. You tell the camera to take a picture, and then shortly after it's taken a picture, once you're able to get within range of a site to send the images back down, well, there you go. You'd have them not instantaneously, but a lot faster than waiting for the whole film bucket to be expended and sent back down. And actually, in practice, the later American satellites, I think it's Keyhole 8, which is called Hexagon. So it was this very large Agena. I think some of them might have even been launched from Titan IIs, which are very large missiles compared to what we're using now. And those would have multiple film buckets. So all the optics and cameras and such would stay up, take a bunch of pictures, and then they could send the pictures down multiple times from the same craft. Those are very big craft. Alright, so we're entering the atmosphere here. Pretty good. Oh, come on. Come on. I don't want this to be a failure. Come on, no. Well, alright. Potentially a total loss. I suppose we'll find out. I just need to keep the heat shield forward. That's all that matters. I can keep the heat shield forward, see if I turn on, let's say there. So you can see the heat shield is already starting to warm up a little bit as we're hitting the early wisps of the atmosphere. Come on. But, as long as I believe I tested it out and it was stable. Again, yet another reason to kind of test out all the properties of your mission before committing and carrying it out like this. You want to make sure that it's stable, because if I built it a little taller, it would not be stable. It would just always try to flip around and kill itself, basically, which would not be pleasant. Any other science? Telemetry analysis. From the highlands. Okay, sure. From the steppes of Russia. So luckily I'm in a mystical, peaceful world where the Soviets are going to give me this science back. So I get my first film return. Yeah, so I do plan to carry out... yeah, I've learned a lot from this playthrough. Like, I definitely... The estimates of, like, cash return from various missions is definitely low, in my opinion. What did I set it to? Like 60% or something like that? Like, I feel like I'd need 80%, MEO, to kind of have more of a challenge where, I have the ability, like... in practice, I would have liked to have built a bigger VAB, which would have allowed me to have 2 lines of rockets at the same time, 2 lines of production, and be able to actually invest money in getting faster build rates, not just have 2 lines of rockets building at the same time. But I would like to have been able to do that, a year or 2 ago, and I just never had the cash, just never got enough return from my missions. All the money ended up going to entry costs for new hardware so I could keep progressing. And, realistically, like, I didn't need to build the Able stage, but, it's kind of, it's good history, it's good fun. So I'd rather play with a bit of a higher cash return like that than to, play fully, because ultimately the less cash you have, the fewer choices you have. So I'd like a small enough amount of cash that I can't just do anything, where, like, okay, now I've got enough to, like, send a Mercury capsule around the moon, but I don't want to have so little money that I don't have any, that I have so few choices where I have to, like, ask experts who've played RP-0, the most strict, where people are like, oh, how much, what's the cheapest sounding rocket you could make? Where it's like, I kind of want to build neat-looking, historic-y sounding rockets, rather than just only the cheapest possible ones that can do the mission. Deploy. No, I don't want to deploy the chute. I want to what do you call it? I want to arm it. Wow, that's quite the dance. It makes me think of the Elmo doll. Okay, so 4 kilometers above the surface, so it must be pretty high mountains in this area. But that should arm and recognize when hopefully we're not going to smash our first film bucket into the ground. Oh man, what a mission! Didn't make it to orbit. Craft almost flipped itself around, but you know what? I do find that fun, despite the fact that I didn't complete that contract, so I'm not going to get the 20,000 credits that I certainly would have liked to get from it. I'd like enough, cash to be able to make a risk, take a chance like this mission. Whereas if, like, the mission would pay enough that I could just build 2 or 3 of these crafts, it would be complete. Wow, we hit the ground pretty hard. It took out the heat shield, but look at that, everything else survived. So I don't want, the cash return to be so high that it's meaningless whether I complete a mission or not. It's a really fine balance, balancing a game like this. So recover vessel. So we're going to get some science back, just not complete that contract. So I'd like to attempt a soft landing on the moon at some point. That'll probably be the most complex thing I attempt in this series. But future plans include... Looks like this video recording went a little longer than I had hoped or expected. So that'll be everything for this video. Probably one of my longest ones. But let's see. So in the next one, I'll show off Shab's his interplanetary, his kind of space probe, which is a light and lovely looking design, and set it up to perhaps I'm not going to hit these windows. Maybe Mars. We'll see. That might be the challenge. But if I find that when I design, set it up and construct it, I can't hit that Mars window, well then fair enough. I'll design something that can be thrown at the moon. But that is what I intend for the next video. I cheated some more money so that I could, let's see, upgrade my VAB assembly building, but it takes like 2 or 3 years to upgrade. So even with that cheat, it's 1956 at this point. See, it shows the year here. Whoa, weird. it shows that you're here. I just couldn't find a way to do this, but in 1.1, thanks to Agathorn, we will have the year able to show in, well, technically the time shows up here for in 1.1, but you get the point. We'll be able to show our good Earth year rather than year like that. So at this point, I'd like to have this constructed, but I would have had to have started building this a couple years ago to have a second construction line. And I'd like to have had some more tens of thousands of dollars in order to upgrade the speed of this line. But those are things that will make my next video series look much more smooth. Somebody's like, "Well, come on, why is everything happening so perfect? How are things going so well this series?" I'm like, "Well, hey, look at that last series I tried where I was getting these cash returns and just had to cheat cash for pretty much anything, unfortunately." So thanks for watching. I believe I've laid out my plans to either try to hit Mars or the Moon next video. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.